Hello?
Hi, Doug. This is Richard. I just had an idea I wanted your feedback on to see if you think it's a good idea.
Okay.
And where it comes from is I was watching the sky over the last week, which I do a lot too, because we have such heavy chemtrails a lot of the time, probably more than half the time, that the whole sky is obliterated. And, I'm living in an area that is famous for 300 crystal clear days a year, which used to be true in the old. It's actually still true now. It's just that they're covered up with hazy chemtrails almost all the time, so that less sun is getting through. And something weird happened in the last week or so, that there's this odd color that I'm not used to in the sky. I think they call it blue, and it's bright and clear, and it makes me think something nefarious is going on. So what do you think about calling up Russ Tanner, who's been on the show before, who runs globalskywatch.com, and see if he can explain where the chemtrails went?
Oh, I think that's a great idea. So you're saying your skies are blue again?
Yeah, I've heard of that, and I've seen it in postcards and stuff, but it's not happening in real life very much at all. And we're having day after day of blue skies, and it makes me think they're up to something nefarious, and I want to see what it is if we can.
Yeah, something's definitely wrong. We better get a hold of Russ and let's see what he says.
Okay, sounds good.
Hello?
Hi, Russ. This is Richard.
Hey, Richard. How you doing?
I'm doing okay. I'm calling you with some interesting questions, I think. So I'm recording the call in case anything interesting comes up, and you might want to do it too.
Yeah, sounds great. Certainly.
What's going on is we have a very strange situation happening here in Arizona, which most people would not think was of any concern, but to me it's the opposite. And what's going on is we normally have massive spraying. There's chemtrails everywhere, and most days they're crisscrossing. Sometimes they go in circles just to kind of flaunt the idea that they're definitely not airliners. They're people flying just for the spraying. And then, of course, you call the weather service and they say, no, don't worry about it. It's just normal ice crystals, and those are just normal airplanes and everything. And my concern is that there's what I notice is they're gone. The last week and maybe more than a week in my area, there's this color in the sky. I think they used to call it blue, and it's really clear and beautiful, and it seems ominous to me, because having dug into what's behind the geoengineering programs for a long time like you, I know that they're not just going to say, well, rats, we're just going to quit now because people found out what we're doing, and I guess we'll stop and shut all the planes down. I don't think that's what's going on. So I thought, as someone who has studied, the aircraft and some aspects of this program a lot more than I have, maybe you have a theory about why the sky's blue again over here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've seen this change. I've heard a lot about this online in our online group, and what I believe they're doing is they're making trails so they're not visible anymore. Now, I did see in 3 different occasions, I saw, in Jamestown, New York, where I lived for a while, and then Philadelphia, and then here in the Bangor area, where every day the sky was covered with trails. And then all of a sudden, on a certain time, at a certain date, historically, they would only cover the sky maybe, 5 to 10 days a month. But the rest of the days, the trails were all short. And this was the first time I saw this happen in all 3 cities. And the trails became very short. So unless you're outside, they dissipate very quickly. So unless you're outside actually looking for them, you don't see them. You don't see anything.
What year was that? About when was that?
In Jamestown, it was about 2007. In Bangor, it was 2010. And in Philadelphia, it was 2013. And it was a big deal because every day the sky looked like a war zone. And, of course, you and I are shocked that people don't, notice.
Nobody notices anything unusual. I mean, which is partly because of the program that they're animating animating chemtrails into cartoons now. So everybody thinks that everything has chemtrails and it's nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, in 2005 is when I first experienced it on a daily basis in Jamestown. Sky beautiful, clear. There's no big airport. Jamestown is a tiny airport. You can only get small puddle jumpers there. You can't get 737s or anything in the airport. So you never see jets in the sky. All of a sudden, they're covering the sky. The following year, I believe it was 2006, that we watched the movie Over the Hedge, which was like an animated. We watched this with some family.
Yeah. That was like with animals and stuff in it.
Yeah, it was pretty funny.
Right.
It was like a comedy thing. And of course, what do I notice in the sky during the first 2/3 of the movie? All throughout the show, there's chemtrails animated in the sky. Now, people
to show that they've always been there and they're just normal and they're ice crystals and everybody go on with your life.
Yeah, I mean, we call this normalization, and this is where they take people who aren't thinking or aren't aware of something, they put something in a picture, and then they become comfortable with this concept and idea because they want to spray without alarming the public. They want it to be a normalized situation. Yeah. So I actually captured a series of photos from the DVD. I could not believe it. Well, I did believe it. I mean, as soon as I saw it, I said, yep, here we go, because I watch television and shows very differently than most people do, because I'm always looking for the propaganda, because virtually everything has propaganda written in it. Most people don't realize this.
Yeah.
And I'm not exaggerating or not trying to be, alarmist or something like this. It's just a fact. And if you understand the agenda and you understand the big picture, the propaganda just pops out at you in everything that you watch. So
it seems like it's getting more serious now since the Chinese companies took over Hollywood. It seems like it's much deeper than it was even before.
Yeah, well, it's been going on a long time. I mean, I know even in the 50s, the CIA was working with Hollywood. But I mean, that's what came out. What was going on behind the scenes is much more intimate relationships. So it's really been going on a long time. And I remember when I first started becoming awake to the way the world really works was in the 80s. You could see it in the 80s. I mean, I began seeing the propaganda in shows in the 80s. Today, you can't watch a movie or television show without seeing the messages and the propaganda, and they're always pushing the same sets of things. They're never pushing freedom. They're never pushing things that we really love and want and what America once stood for. They're always pushing, things that lead to globalism and fear and need for security to enslave the people, all of these.
Breaking up families is a big one now, too. And,
absolutely.
And showing that men are really terrible, especially if they don't have dark enough skin.
Exactly. I mean, this whole campaign against men, and then you have changes in the way that the field of psychology classifies certain behaviors and certain desires, and how it's all becoming normalized. And this is what have you ever seen the Soviet? I saw this years and years and years ago. I've got it on one of my websites. But the ex-KGB agent who came out and he explained how America was being subverted and why, and he talks about the 4 stages of destroying a country.
No, I missed that. What is it? What are the stages?
Right, there's 4 stages. It's demoralization, which is the longest stage. It takes many, many years, but they demoralize a country. Then they destabilize the country. So it's demoralization, destabilization. The 3rd step is crisis. That's where there's a crisis that happens. That's where we get the Masonic order, Ab Chao, order from chaos. You create a crisis, and then out of the crisis will come the phoenix. Out of the crisis will come, they normalize the new situation.
Is that when you get utopia at that point, or is that after?
What's that now?
Is that when you get utopia, or is that later?
Well, that's what they're going to call it. They're going to call it utopia. We call it globalism, and basically it's surrendering your rights for the sake of security, and that's right. And the thing is that your rights and your freedoms are a zero-sum game. In other words, if you give them up, somebody else has them. In other words, if you're going to no longer be able to do certain things or exercise certain freedoms, somebody has now the power to regulate that freedom. And with that power comes great opportunity for them to exploit it so they can profit and they can sustain their power. And that's what globalism is really all about.
Yeah. So one of the best ways to hide that, since it's a giant conspiracy, is to demonize conspiracy theories as all nonsense.
Yeah, not only that, I mean, you saw the FBI recently came out and publicized that, they're categorizing conspiracy theorists with terrorists now.
Oh, yeah.
Terrorism, if you believe in conspiracy. Well, who in the world would want to mute ideas when the whole of human history is replete with conspiracies? Conspiracies to take over governments and countries and fights and among powerful families and in industrialists. I mean, this is the history of the world.
Well, just to clarify what you mean by conspiracies, it's just cooperation between people for the same goal, right?
Right. To mute the ideas of conspiracies is to mute the idea that more than two people get together to do devious things.
Yeah, nobody wants to do that. They all want to stay totally isolated and not be effective by joining into groups.
Yeah, there's an old saying, exactly. There's an old saying that says the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was in convincing the world he doesn't exist.
Right.
If you don't believe that there's a conspirator out there who's doing something against you, then you won't fight against them. And there's no more easily conquerable enemy than someone who knows they have no enemies, who believes they have no enemies.
Yeah. And this reminds me of the sophistication in propaganda that was done by, what was the guy's name who was Freud's nephew?
Bernays,
Edmund Bernays.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like he had a lot of allies in other countries doing this worldwide.
Well, I mean, this is why I believe that they did so much human testing throughout the 1900s. They tested human behavior. They drugged people to see what their actions was. The key is, knowledge is power. And when you understand how people act and react to different stimuli, then it gives you the power to produce the stimuli so that you can get the desired result.
Yeah.
Well, the desired result, in the case of the modern-day globalists, is to have a global government that controls and is a supranational power over all the countries of the world. So if you know how to stimulate the public in such a way that they will accept that idea, which throughout history...
Maybe even implement it for you, even, as cooperative as possible, right?
Well, exactly. Even not just make people, unresistant to the idea, but actually get people on board. And of course, the way that they do, there's a lot of different stimuli they use to do this, but one of the most effective, Carol Rosin actually gave this short speech about Werner von Braun, who's one of the German scientists who came over and was considered the father of modern rocketry.
Yeah, was he part of Operation Paperclip, bringing the Nazi scientists over here?
Yes. And Carol Rosin actually said that he said to her that be careful about the weaponization of space and the military-industrial complex, because the powers that be, and this is a guy who ran NASA and was the chief scientist behind rocket development in the United States and previously Germany. He said they're going to create threats that are going to scare people in to ultimately to globalism. And those threats would be, nuclear attacks, would be asteroids, would be war, would be pollution. Now, if you watch television today, every one of those themes, the terrorist theme and the pollution, and of course they blame it on the people.
It's like Werner is directing all the shows. They're right in line with what he said. And remember what he said was the ultimate mother of all false flags that was planned?
A false alien invasion.
Exactly right. Just like what's that movie? Independence Day.
Independence Day, yeah.
where people finally give up the nonsense of independent countries and realize they have to have one ruler coordinating everything for their own safety.
Exactly. Yeah, this is the theme that you see throughout Hollywood right now. As you see, there's other themes too that all play into globalism, but this is one of the big ones. Is that all the countries have to come together for the purpose of protecting everybody. But what they don't tell you is the threats that are being produced are produced by the very people who want the globalism, the industrialists, the very superpower industrialists who want global government.
Right.
This is Machiavellianism. It's a business model like vaccines. You create a problem, and then you sell the solution, and you profit from the solution.
And it really helps them that the technology is, 50 or 100 years, probably 100 years ahead of what the public knows about. And Werner von Braun said that by 1952 or 4, I forget which one of those, they had conquered or figured out gravity neutralization and could fly their own fake UFO ships for the invasion.
Exactly. I mean, I know I have two kind of brushes with that fame where I have a friend who actually was in classified military technology, and he said to a friend of he was a friend of a family, and he said to his family member, who then told me that that what you're seeing, he said, watch, and this was like, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, he said, the technology that we're using right now in the military, he says, watch television, and whatever technology you see on your favorite science fiction show, he said, we're way beyond that.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and that's, of course, think of it. I mean, in a day like today, if they wanted to pull off a fake alien invasion, what would they do? They'd have to have super advanced technology that was so threatening and so scary to the public,
right,
that it would make everybody want the world to band together for this great battle. And of course, who's going to profit from the great battle? The very globalists who are using this technology to fool the world.
Right.
And this gets into Project Bluebeam and other things like that are very eccentric, hard for people to believe, but it's just like,
I know.
Of course, that's the idea, to make it hard for people.
That's the camouflages. It's all unbelievable and motivated by people who actually aren't nice. They're very bad. they're extreme evil, which most normal people can't imagine is real.
Yeah, and one of my favorite subjects to watch is how Hollywood always takes their favorite groups of people to promote as these die-hard good people. And they're not so dumb. I mean, the people who work in this production are not so dumb to present them as perfect. But they always have, police officers, they have lawyers, they have they have all these types of groups of people, or the FBI. There's a lot of these I call them government saves the world shows.
Yeah. Well, it's been since Matt Dillon and before. I mean, in Gunsmoke, he may not have saved the whole world. He could only save one town, but he would always shoot the bad guys faster than they could do anything else, and he only shot bad people, and he was just so selfless working for the government.
Right, and this constant repetition of these themes that hey, they're not perfect, but they are working for the good, and there is no conspiracy, and if there is, that we route it out, and we're going to win, and we're going to save the day. This theme is repeated over and over in movies in Hollywood right now.
Right.
When you understand the agenda, when you understand what it's about, it doesn't matter if you're watching the Bold Type, it doesn't matter if you're watching Castle, old episodes of Castle, you're watching Nathan Fillon's new show, Rookie, that couple episodes ago, by the way, the terrorist was called a fringe nationalist. Now, it wasn't that long ago that loving your country was depicted as a positive thing. But why is nationalism becoming such a crime and such a...
That was a really interesting switch. I mean, you think back to World War II and all the movies then, Bally High and 12 O'Clock High and all these things with John Wayne, and all the great people were nationalists, and they kind of quietly made a complete 180-degree switch, right? So now we know to watch out for nationalists because they're worse than almost any other people, except maybe white males. But they're one of the worst people you could run into. You have to be careful.
Well, exactly, and on this episode, and I could go on, and I've actually documented so much propaganda and shows. I stopped doing it because it's just an exercise in futility because there's so much of it. But this is just one example. In 2 episodes ago, in The Rookie, with Nathan Fillion, used to people who love Firefly, which was a cult classic series. Then he had Castle, which was a very big show, lasted many seasons. Now he's got The Rookie. He's actually the executive producer. Well, the fringe nationalists, they use words like fringe to associate that with the other term.
So is fringe as bad as extreme?
Yes, of course.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I mean, so you're an extreme nationalist. I mean, It's bad enough if you're a nationalist, but if you're an extreme nationalist, though, watch out. So this was the guy who was the bad guy hurting people, who was the villain. Now, why this switch? The switch is because you can't have globalism when nationalism is strong. So you have to break down nationalism in order to institute globalism. And I know that people out there have such a hard time, believing that all of these shows are working together and that all these... What do you think you could do with hundreds of billions of dollars when you have all of these people who have the same belief system, who are super powerful, working together?
Yeah. The scope of the real collusion is beyond most people's imagination, I think.
Investing a few $1 million per episode to produce this a propagandic television show is drops in the bucket investment. Mm-hmm. But the power in terms of changing people's belief system and accepting globalism and accepting all of the garbage that comes with it is priceless. So for them, it's an investment. They have no problem spending hundreds of millions of dollars in production to produce these shows, and they're really, really good at embedding the propaganda. Can I give you one? Here's one example, too.
Sure.
I've mentioned this once in a while before, but they're scaring people to death of potassium. Now, barium, we all know, is one of the big constituents in chemtrails.
Right.
What the FDA did then, back in the 10, 15, I can't remember when it happened, 10, 15 years ago, is they actually limited over-the-counter potassium supplements to 99 milligrams and below. 99 milligrams of potassium is nothing. Your body... Yeah, that's
a common supplement amount, if I remember right, actually.
Yeah, well, 99 milligrams is so small because according to real health sources, I mean, you need, at least a couple thousand milligrams a day. So you'd have to take so much. And most people are really afraid to take 10 pills. They look at them as like medicine. Oh, my God. So barium actually dramatically reduces potassium in the mammals' bodies, including humans. Uh-huh. And low potassium can induce arrhythmias and heart attacks.
Right.
So the way that I got rid of...
It would mess up the sodium-potassium balance across cell membranes, which are important for everything.
Huge, critical for life. And so they scare people to death. They reduce the amount of over-the-counter potassium. But at the same time, what I saw, because I was watching Hollywood, and I don't watch a lot of Hollywood. I just watch a little here and there, but I watch it very differently than most people do. They have these shows and movies like The Resident, House, which was one of the most popular medical dramas of all time.
Yeah.
Some movies, I can't remember the names of these movies, but I've seen these, and if I don't watch much, I imagine what's out there that I haven't seen. But all of them are demonizing potassium. In fact, on The Resident, somebody was killed by a potassium overdose, which is possible to do, but you have to have an enormous amount of potassium to do that.
Right.
So they're scaring people to death of potassium so that they limit their intake, right? And then what happens? You have an increase in heart attacks.
Right.
And that accomplishes depopulation, which is one of the globalist agendas.
Right, and on the way to it, it's really helpful for the medical industry, too.
Oh, absolutely. It becomes tremendously profitable. And this is part of their
which I
game.
don't think most of the doctors know about this and are not really involved. The ones I've talked to, most of them think that, and this is going back many decades, they really believe, because of their education, that all the drugs and the other things that they're doing are cutting edge science and saving lives and saving humanity and, working for truth and justice and the American way and everything like that.
Right, and it's very hard to convince people when you spend $250,000 on an education to be told those things that you just said.
Yeah.
It's going to take an extremely strong personality to overcome all of the propaganda. And I'm not against doctors or anything. Doctors serve a very important purpose in the world, and crisis medicine is phenomenal. It's phenomenally expensive, but it's phenomenal and can do great things. But we're talking about usually disease management. But when these doctors have spent this kind of money to be told these things, it takes a particularly strong personality to rise above that.
Yeah, it's rare. That's right.
Yeah. And so doctors, I don't blame doctors in the sense of that they're out to get people or anything like that. It's nothing like that. It's just that they have been told what the pharmaceutical companies want them to learn, because the pharmaceutical companies took over medical education in the country in the 30s.
Yeah, well, they started working on it in about 1910 with the Flexner Report. But in a way, the doctors are being used like a human shield, so that they'll be the face of the medical industry, and it's a nice face rather than the people who actually run it.
Absolutely, and so that goes back to the kind of shows you see in Hollywood. You've got doctors, you've got policemen, and you've got all your government workers and policemen, and you've got lawyers, and then you've got government workers, and you've got medical shows.
Right.
You which always depict these really passionate people who are like, we're going to save lives.
Yeah, exactly. I know I haven't slept for a week, but it's just to save more people, and I just have to keep going.
Right. When you read the Journal of the American Medical Association, it was about 20 years ago or so, they actually polled people who were in medical school, and they 80% of them admitted that they were doing it for the money.
Okay.
But strangely, these shows never tell you that side of things.
No. And there are some really idealistic doctors, and especially people who are thinking they want to get into medicine and they haven't run into some of the contradictions, and they really do want to help people. Oh, absolutely. I think in all fields, there are people with good intentions, and there are doctors who, it's not all about the money, but after you pay that kind of money to be educated into the idea that injecting mercury and aluminum and formaldehyde and polysorbates into your veins or into a child's underdeveloped immune system, after you've been told that over and over and over again, and you can use doctors as human shields, then you create a very dangerous situation. Yeah, where you've got a whole workforce that if people don't go along with the humanitarian treatments they're doing, they'll steal your children using CPS. Which is
right.
But as far as the invisible chemtrails go, it's interesting that, as you pointed out, and we talked about it in the early 50s, which is quite a while ago, they, according to Werner von Braun, mastered gravity control and could fly without fuel at all. And yet it's taken, another 70 years almost to master being able to spray things without being seen. That was harder.
Right. I mean, this is, with the chemtrails that are not visible, I have seen it here, and it's very hard to see the jets because they started in 2010 in this area when they started using short trails instead of long ones on 2/3 of the month. They started flying at higher altitudes as well. So this is out of sight, out of mind. Keep it out of the mind of the public. Right. But I have, in the last few years, seen jets. And normally it's when I'm working outside, and I will hear it. Because you can't just look in the sky and see a jet not leaving a trail. It's flying at, 30,000 feet or even lower, 15,000 feet. You're not going to be able to just spot them. But I can hear them. And then I look up and really carefully try to find it. And then I can often find the jet, and there will be no trail. And every time I've gone to Flight Radar 24, the jets that especially along this flight path. Many of the jets are military, but all the jets that used to leave trails are all military. There's one pattern for good. I'm not saying that's true across the board in other places that commercial, there could be commercial programs. In fact, one whistleblower came out and gave great detail about this happening in Italy. But nevertheless, I've seen these jets flying along this flight path that has been reserved for, right in this area that's been reserved for chemtrail emitting jets. And now many of them leave no trail at all, but people have to be aware. I am very sensitive to the fallout from this.
Yeah, that's the other question, is how do we know they just didn't say, well, too bad we can't do chemtrails anymore, we got caught. How do we know it's still going on invisible?
Yep, I've had this in our Facebook group. We've had this kind of talk going on for the last 6 months or so, where people are saying, "Hey, we have a break. Trump must be doing something."
Yeah, the president stopped it to finally,
And I want to tell people, as somebody who smells it and tastes it, my business partner can also smell and taste it when it's strong enough, but she feels it in her body. First. I smell and taste it first, and then I feel the pain and the inflammation in my body that comes from it as the plumes descend. The air is every bit as bad in terms of how much of this inflammatory, metallic, chemical, tasting, smelling, inflammation-inducing stuff that is falling down. Every bit as bad now with perfectly blue skies, with no visible trails, long or short, as it was when the sky was completely plastered. So clearly, they have developed some technology and some method of making these things not visible. And there was a whistleblower about more than 10 years ago who actually was on YouTube, and I cannot find it. I couldn't capture videos at the time, so I didn't capture it, and I'm so bummed. But I did see it, and he said dogmatically, one thing you need to realize is the additives they're using to make chemtrails dissipate quickly. This is right around the time I started seeing the trails go short. He said, I would be more worried about the additives they're using to make the chemtrails dissipate quickly than the actual trails themselves. Not to say that
I never even thought of that. Yeah, that they could be additional toxic components.
Right. Well, this is what this guy said, and of course he's gone, and I can't find his videos there.
And we don't know anything about what technology they may be using to make them totally invisible, not just short, but non-existent. We don't know about that, right?
I don't know. Yeah, other than the whistleblowers that are mostly commonly known about, I don't have inside information, except years ago when I was becoming awake as to how the world really went. I did read intelligence advisors and whistleblower reports, and this is before the internet, and so the information that got out was extremely limited to people who are willing to pay money for these newsletters and reports from whistleblowers and people who are on the inside.
I've heard that people used to actually go to libraries to read books. And
my God. What is a library? What is that?
Libraries are where you get together for Drag Queen Story Hour and fun events like that. But they used to have people going there to read books and study things, and medical students and law students and everything used to go there, spend long hours in libraries reading actual physical books, not even computer screens.
I was one of those people. Yeah. This is what really began to open my eyes, is when I first started going to political party meetings of this third party in Florida and got to know some of these people who were amazingly knowledgeable. I didn't believe them and take them at face value, so I started going to the law library and researching. And one of the first things I researched is the IRS code, because there were these people who were saying the IRS doesn't have jurisdiction over people, and there have been court cases like Eisner versus McCumber and Brushbauer versus Erie Railroad that actually say that income is not the stuff you get when you go to work and you get a paycheck. That's not income.
Yeah, Sherry Jackson and Joe Bannister and those people were talking about it.
Exactly. Now, when these people were saying this in the beginning, and they were citing these federal court cases, I was kind of like, wow, that's hard to believe. I'm going to have to look that up. So I went to Stetson University. I went to the Florida College, they have a government book depository in their basement, this big, huge room where nobody is, and So we went down there, and I made, I don't know, hundreds of dollars worth of copies, which I still have today. And I read these court cases, and that's where I began to wake up, because I would read this right from federal court cases, like Eisner versus McCumber, if I remember right, is the one that says the only thing that's classifiable as income is a capital gain. In other words, if you make a stock investment and that stock value goes up, that's a capital gain. Right. That capital gain is taxable. That is income. That's considered income. But income is not when you go to your employer and get a paycheck. That's a barter. You are exchanging your labor and your time for an equal value of money. So it's not income. It's an exchange. It is not income. So it's not taxable according to this court case. They defined income. And when I read that, I read it probably 50 times. I just read that and read it, and like, is there any other way that could be interpreted?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, if that's true, what else is like that, you know? The problem with that kind of knowledge is that even if you're correct legally and lawfully, you can just get sent to jail anyway if you dare to use that kind of knowledge.
Yeah, and
it's heavily suppressed.
Well, yeah, exactly, and many people have, because you have people who stopped filing, and then they went to prison, and then you have other people who've won cases, and it's the same, basically the same argument. It's kind of like, well, do you get a jury who's informed or a jury who's not informed?
Yeah.
And interestingly, when you I've sat on a couple juries, and they will tell you the first thing is, you're not here to judge the law.
Which is false, right?
which the whole purpose of a jury is to judge the law.
Yeah.
That is part of what made the concept of the United States so great, is that we are in judgment of the law as individual citizens, quote unquote. I know, and I get citizens is a bad word and all that stuff, but just trying to use it for communication purposes.
Well, yeah, it's got a reasonable meaning, and what you're talking about is the whole concept of jury nullification. And do you remember where that came from?
Tell me.
No, I don't, unfortunately.
Oh, do I remember where it came from?
Yeah, where is that? What is it? Where is it documented?
I don't remember. Federalist Papers, maybe, or I actually don't remember. But that is part of what you're told. And this is one thing when I served on a jury, and it was so funny, because they actually, in one of the juries, they elected me as the foreman, and I started telling them this stuff. I started talking to them about the yellow fringe flag. And all this stuff in the jury deliberation room, and they were all looking at me like, they were actually very interested. But anyway, getting back to jury nullification, is that we're told when you sit on a jury that you are not in judgment of the law. You are here to judge the facts of the case. I will give you the law. And I'm thinking to myself...
And that's the judge saying that, I guess, right?
That's the judge saying that. And that's fundamentally untrue. And so that was another thing that helped me become awake. That was another seed that was planted. I was like, why is the judge telling us things that are legally inaccurate, that we're not here to judge the law, when that's the fundamental premise of a jury?
Because we all know that the whole education of judges and all their training is just to try to tell what's the truth, right?
It's an amazing situation we live in. But I tell you, and it's kind of like, it's up to that's why some people are successful fighting and some people aren't, because the whole, it depends on the jury you get.
Juries vary. That's why they want to be as careful as possible about who gets on a jury.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I was called in to serve on a jury. It was either the second or third time in Pasco County, Florida, where I spent most of my life. And they were doing jury selection, and one of the attorneys said something when they were like giving the first lecture to all the prospective jurors. I can't remember exactly how he worded it, but it was contrary to what I knew to be true. So I raised my hand and I said, I'm just asking because I was asking very humbly to be. I didn't want to be confrontational, but I said it was my understanding that that we actually judge the law, and if the law is bad, we can give an innocent verdict. And it was funny because the attorney smirked and started laughing under his breath, and the other one kind of stuttered for a minute and said, well, just so you understand, you're here to judge the facts of the case, and da-da-da, and then he kind of went rambling, but it really kind of shook them. Well, guess what? Number one, I wasn't chosen to sit on that jury, and guess what? I was never called back. After being called previously a few times, I was never called back after that question that I asked to serve on a jury. How?
So there's a special notation they put on your file, probably. Watch out for this one, he can see.
He's like one of those who actually understands jury nullification. We can't have him sitting on a jury.
Exactly. Yeah, so the only way to get in with jury nullification is to officially not know anything about it.
Right. So we're sitting here on the brink of globalism, and this is a very, I love talking to you because you're one of the people who are truly awake to what's going on, and you see the big picture. And, I love being able to help people watch television and understand all the messages that are in there. But people have to understand, that people who write these scripts, they know exactly what they're doing. In fact, you don't become a scriptwriter unless you're on board. You don't become an executive producer unless you're on board,
And I want to, before I forget, and don't lose that train of thought in particular, but I want to mention to people that even though I didn't remember, unfortunately, where jury nullification is documented as being real, I know who would, and that's the Fully Informed Jury Association. And so check on them if you want more information on that subject. So
Absolutely. But I love the thing that exhilarates me is helping people to see through the lies. I hate lies. I just ask people to imagine the world without lies. What if politicians, you just take politicians as one control group, it was impossible through some supernatural means that they could not lie anymore.
Wasn't there a Jim Carrey movie about that? And what
Liar, yeah.
Yeah, falling down in the elevator because he couldn't say anything because everything he was going to say was not true.
Exactly.
Something like that. So it would be really hurtful for most of the people in the power structure.
It would be devastating in that because they rely on lies. This whole system is built, the whole idea of globalism is built on a mountain of lies. And those lies are propagated through your favorite television shows and your favorite movies every day, and I want people to open their eyes and begin to see this, because when they begin to understand that all of the writers, the executive producers, the production houses, all have the same agenda, because they're all controlled by people who have the same goals working together.
Yeah, it's a simple training method like you would train a parrot, right? That you just say something 1,000 times to the parrot, and after a while the parrot says, yeah, that's true. Conspiracy theorists are all crazy, or whatever you're telling the parrot. And that's the training you're talking about.
Exactly. And was it Goebbels who said that? It was, came out of the Hitler era, who said, repeat a lie long enough and the public will believe it, in short form anyway. And that's what we see today. And this is why I tell people, one of the most important things, besides being aware of what the agenda is, what will help you believe that it's real is seeing that everything in Hollywood is pushing the same thing. Yeah. Now, pushing the same set of agendas that ultimately lead to globalism. And the problem is people don't make the connections all the time that, hey, the idea of disarmament really is a globalism agenda.
It's so brilliant, because disarming everybody is obviously going to create world peace. But so will killing everybody who disagrees with you, by the way.
Right. Yeah, I know how amazing that people fall into that. But one of the things I try to tell people is, and I know this goes against what a lot of people say, but get out of your heart and get into your head. Now, if you watch one of the decades-long mantras of modern music and television is, go with your heart. Go with your heart. Now, I'm not saying, because a lot of times today people say your heart is where the good things come from. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying emotionalism.
You have to define heart, right? Because heart can also tell you that something is wrong because it hurts somebody. but
Right.
but the kind of hypnotic emotional response is exactly what all the propagandists work with, right?
Right, because when you're in your heart or when you're in your emotionalism, you will end up repeating and falling victim to all of the repeated mantra of propaganda that you come across.
Right, because the mantras are taught to you not just as repeated neutral concepts. They're taught to you with an emotional counterpart of being
exactly
good or bad, right?
Exactly, and what people really need to remember is that we had a saying back when I was in the political party in Florida, is they would say hard cases make bad law. And what that means is that what the powers that be like to do is they like to take this fringe situation. They say, oh, if we pass this particular law, then this person over here who's in this really extreme situation is going to suffer. And it's like, that's a hard case, and you can't justify bad law with a hard case. You need to take the 99% of positive results that are going to come from this law, and that's what you need to use to decide whether or not this law should be passed. So the important thing is, I tell people, stay in your head. When you're watching television, look for the takeaway. It's called the takeaway in media and journalism. What is the takeaway? The takeaway is the message you take away from something you've watched or something you've read. And the funny thing is, the takeaway is usually embedded in such a way that it's a little hard to detect. You have to go back and think about it, because the lies that they tell you aren't always the blatant propaganda, like on The Rookie, where they call the guy the fringe nationalist.
Yeah.
Or
so what's an example of what you're talking about?
Well, an example is what they'll do is they'll one technique that they use is they actually will give you a set of circumstances that happen and show you the result, and then they won't tell you what to believe. They'll let you come to the conclusion. So they basically set up a premise with a predetermined conclusion that you'll come up with, and that's the takeaway. I suppose that would be something like, let's say there was a home, and we all know the globalists hate guns and want to disarm everybody. So let's say there's a home invasion. So
they don't hate guns in their own hands, by the way. They just hate,
of course, no.
Just in the general public, because they're all subject to going crazy, of course.
Exactly, it's complete hypocrisy. So what they'll do is they'll broadcast a news story where this is just one of a million examples where there'll be a home invasion. The homeowner has a gun, and in the course of the invasion, the homeowner accidentally shoots one of his own family members.
Yeah, or all of them. Who knows?
Well, who knows? And so what they'll do is they'll use that like, lives would be saved if the homeowners didn't have this gun, and la-di-da, and so on.
Guns actually make homeowners go crazy, and all normal people go crazy. I think that's part of the message, right? If you have a gun, you're probably going to go berserk and shoot everybody.
Or if you have a gun, you're a wide-eyed fringe nationalist who's going to use it on the next person you see.
Exactly. It could even be a constitutionalist or something like that.
A crazy constitutionalist, right. One thing that people need, what is the one common factor that has been present in all mass shootings that were devastating mass shootings, where they weren't averted? What is the common factor? I ask people to think about this, and first a lot of people in my circles talk about it. They say, some drug, some psychotropic drug or something that they were using. I'm like, yeah, that was present a lot, or not but even a prescribed drugs, a lot of the Ritalin and the other drugs that were present. But what is the factor that was present when somebody went into a building or a movie theater or a church or whatever and started shooting people? The common factor is the citizens were not armed.
That's true. It's basically usually a gun-free zone or something like that, huh?
Yes, in Chicago, where they have so many shootings. But even if it's not a gun-free zone, mass shootings are devastating when there isn't an armed citizen present.
Yeah,
it is true. The stories with the armed citizens where they are averted, but those stories are not broadcast on mainstream news. They just don't tell you about them.
Yeah. Well, they think that we're not really very smart because we're going to answer your question not that way, but saying, well, obviously, the common factor is there was a gun. All we have to do is make crime illegal, or make guns illegal, and that should take care of it. Maybe give
Right.
everybody a little sign they can carry around, or a card for their wallet that says gun-free zone, or person that can't be attacked, or something like that.
Right. So if somebody invades your home, say, sorry, this is a gun-free zone. That's what you're supposed to tell them.
Yeah.
Right? While you're waiting for the police to show up and nothing against police, but I mean, the last time I had to call the police, it took them about 45 minutes to get here.
Well, and you don't want police living in everybody's house. That would be the only way to keep them safe, right?
That would be, armed police. Why don't we just have citizens who know how to use guns, who are trained, and who, in Kennesaw, Georgia, there's a story going way back, which where the citizens became armed by some edict, local edict, and what happened? All the areas, all the categories of local crime decreased dramatically.
Yeah,
of course, because if you're not going to go, think about this. If someone who wanted to commit a mass shooting knew that they were signing their own death warrant by doing such a thing.
Most of them are smart enough not to do that, yeah. Well, if that happened now, I mean, the criminals could probably sue the people of the town and get the law overturned.
Yeah, the way the court systems work. That's one of the things that has to be fixed are the court systems, because the court systems have messed up so many other areas in a very tactical way. But that's one of the things, is not only having an armed citizenry present would not only deter the shootings, but also cut them short. And I've heard many stories and have videos online from people who actually cut shootings short. So when somebody comes to you and says, hey, we need to get rid of guns so that we can get rid of gun violence, what they need to say is, we've already tested the theory of getting rid of guns, because how many people in your supermarket are carrying? How many people were armed and present and armed at these mass shootings that were very devastating? None. There were none present. That's why it wasn't averted. Just a little bit of common sense, a little bit of application of logic will turn this ridiculous argument around so that we don't have to suffer.
Yeah, so in a way, what you're pointing out is that one of the main goals is to get rid of logic.
That's a great subject, because that's what I meant earlier about emotionalism. I remember the day, Richard, when I was watching the news. I was a kid, in my teens, and I remember that it was the first time I heard a news reporter ask somebody how they felt about the fire that they just suffered, that their neighbor just suffered through.
Oh, yeah.
And I was just thinking to myself, why are they wasting valuable news time asking this person how they felt about it? What we need to know are the facts of the case so that we can solve it and prevent it in the future.
Yeah.
That's what we need to know. So what did you see? What do you know? What could we learn to prevent this? But he started asking. And then I saw that pattern on every show after that. How do you feel about this? How do you feel?
Yeah.
And if you watch the news, how do you feel?
That's just confirming what you said, is that if you can get people out of logic, that I'm really, I think one of the most critical things is to get, in a different way, people into their heart so they don't want to hurt anybody. And we stop, they won't work for toxic corporations that destroy the world and things like that. But the level that you're talking about, if you get into just crazy emotion that doesn't match what's really going on, it's like back when they had the first big chemical fertilizer push for the Green Revolution to save the world. And it was basically the chemical companies were wanting to cover all the land in the world with chemical fertilizers because you can make a lot of money, and they didn't realize their bosses wanted them to do it because it also causes starvation and works toward a different agenda. But the thing was, they presented it not just logically that here's what chemical fertilizers do. They showed people just their lives being saved by their food being poisoned. It was so great. And they do the same thing with drugs now, that people are dancing through fields with bluebirds flying around and nice music, while the font 1 or 0 print about that it may kill you, but it's actually really good, and ask your doctor about whether you should take it. It's all emotional.
Absolutely. In emotionalism, you can't control people who are logical, because gun control isn't logical.
Right.
So many of the policies, globalism is not logical. Taking power away from the people is not logical. When we have a model, the United States becoming the most powerful nation in history, or in recorded history at least, the most free country, the most prosperous country, we have a model, a historical model that works.
Yeah.
But globalism has to go against all of those principles, and they can't do that when people are logical. They can only do that by making people think emotionalistically and then presenting fringe cases. That's what they do. Emotionalistic mindset, and then present them with fringe cases.
Yeah, and Hollywood's great for that too. I mean, the production quality of some of the drug commercials is great. I mean, these people are so grateful that everyone's life is saved because of the newest drug.
Exactly, and that's, I mean, what you said a minute ago was such a great example of it, is that you have the words racing the background, may cause kidney damage and this, that, and the other, and if you start bleeding, see your doctor, and if your brain starts to swell up this and could cause death in certain circumstances. And then
right, and you talk really fast when you say that, right.
Right, but while they're saying the words, the pictures on the screen are, like you said, people running.
It makes you feel good, so it's fine if your heart explodes or whatever. The music is nice.
Right, flowers and butterflies. So people tend to ignore the words, and they gravitate towards, this is what an emotionalistic person does, is they will gravitate towards the butterflies and unicorns, and they will gravitate away from the negativity. But the problem is, a logical person will be a problem solver. And say, newscaster, why did you ask how this person felt? What a waste of time. Ask somebody who knows where the fire started, what could have been the cause, and what people could do to prevent it in the future, because we want to save lives. We want to improve the quality of life. We want people to live. We want them to live better. That's one of my goals in life. And you can only do that when you use logic problem solving. But if you become emotionalistic and you start thinking with your emotions rather than drawing conclusions with good logic, then, and it's so funny because the whole world's upside down, because what they're trying to convince people is that when you're emotional is when you're the most effective. That's when you're really living life. That's when you're doing good in the world.
I think there's a lot of signs of using frequency weapons now to induce emotion as well, because we've had people like Barry Trower and Mark Steele and others on the phone. Barry in particular was talking about the state of development of frequency weapons by World War II, and that they could be used directed primarily at single individuals, turning them into assassins or making them commit suicide or go crazy or whatever they wanted. And that was just by using a frequency that later became the foundation of the telecom industry. And it's gone to another stage now. Well, just to complete that thought, so that if everybody is keeping a cell phone, which is a radiation machine, against your head or against your body, thinking it's government approved and it's safe, that can change the electronic component of mind operation, brain operation specifically. And now they've gone to another level of that, which is like trying to make the chemtrails invisible would obviously be very useful. Being able to direct these frequency weapons at millions of people at the same time with the same effectiveness as if they were one person. There are private security companies exposed by whistleblowers like Brian Coffrin lately, who are literally involved in doing this in all the major cities. And when you look at the behavior of people demonstrating the kind of emotional level thinking that you're talking about, instead of explaining what they're protesting against, they bring noise things into the city, and they approach speakers and start hitting drums so nobody can hear them, and they start screaming at the sky and, destroying businesses and stuff like that. That's the kind of emotion that you're talking about. And I think it's not just from commercials, it's from, like the invisible chemtrails. I think there are invisible frequency weapons in play at this point.
Exactly. And I'll tell you about another and to add on to that something that works in harmony with that, but is, I believe, one of the top 3 health issues right now in our world, and people need to wake up, and people are going to have a hard time with this. But chemical aerosol injection contains, according to Dr. Marvin Herndon, who did a study, contain mercury.
Yeah.
Now, what does mercury do to you emotionally? It lowers your GABA, your gamma-aminobutyric acid, which is a neuroregulator. So you can't sleep, your brain races, you start having looping thoughts, you can get anxious, you can get depressed, you can be bipolar, have symptoms of bipolar disorder, you can even get suicidal thoughts, panic attacks, bouts of anger, general fear, just tremendous feelings of fear can come over you. You can be obsessive, compulsive, in the list, hyperactive, the list goes on and on. But one thing mercury does, I call it the fear drug. But mercury, I actually saw a study when I lived in Florida. I'll never forget this, and again, I couldn't capture it at the time. I was learning about the web, but it was very early on in the internet.
Right.
But this study actually said exposure to mercury makes groups of people more controllable. That is almost word for word what the study said.
Yeah.
And it does it by making people fearful and emotional. They start thinking emotionally rather than logically.
Well, I think it interferes with brain function, and that probably helps do that, right?
Well, it does so many things. GABA is just one of the things. It messes with all of your hormones. Mercury messes. It binds to sulfur, and most of your proteins have sulfur-bearing amino acids in them. So it messes with all protein metabolism. Messes with your hormones.
Right.
It actually tears your brain, your neurofibril, your brain cells apart. It strips the tubulin and actin, leaving denuded neurofibrils in your brain, which short circuit essentially is what happens, causing Alzheimer's and memory loss. And I've been through much of what I'm talking about.
Right.
So besides the electromagnetic weapons, we have the electromagnetic weapons happening. But now, I wrote an article a couple years before Dr. Herndon came out with a study, probably 3 or 4 years. I wrote an article saying, I believe chemtrails contain mercury. I don't know how, but the symptom set that I'm experiencing and other people I know around me are experiencing can only be explained. Many of those symptoms can only be explained by mercury exposure, and it's happening over large areas at the same time. And I started witnessing this. And so I wrote an article saying, basically, I said, chemtrails must contain mercury. And a few years later, Dr. Herndon came out with his article stating the same thing. And I was like, thank God. We now have something from someone who is a scientist who is stating the same thing.
Yeah.
And mercury is the drug of the globalists. They absolutely love it. That's why it's in vaccines. Even if you believe vaccines work, mercury is used as a preservative. Do you know how many other preservatives you could use to preserve a vaccine? Why would you choose one of the most toxic substances on the planet to do it?
Yeah, it's an interesting question that hasn't been answered. Why is mercury the best preservative, that you'd want to choose?
Yes. And also about compact fluorescent. Remember, they got rid of incandescent light bulbs. Of course, apparently they're coming back now. But got rid of incandescents and forced everybody to go to compact fluorescence, the CFL bulbs.
Right.
Well, all this stuff started coming out on the internet. Hey, they're dangerous if you break one in your house. The state of Maine actually did a study showing that they are dangerous, and I'll tell you more about that in a second. So what do they do at Home Depot? I remember shortly after all this internet information came out, they actually had people at the entrances of Home Depot standing behind tables with pamphlets to speak to people about the safety of CFLs. Yes, they're safe. We know they're safe. They're proven safe. You don't have to worry about any of this. Well, the state of Maine did a study. If you drop one, whether it's a hardwood floor or a carpet, in a house, and after you do the EPA-approved cleanup, the levels in your house will be 25 micrograms per liter, sometimes 50, and they even measure, the state of Maine doing this study, up to 100 micrograms per cubic liter of mercury. How much is 25? Let's just start with 25 micrograms per cubic liter. The
cubic meter of air, is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay.
If you have 0.3, it will trigger an investigation as to the source in a factory. If you have between 1 and 3, it can shut down an office or a factory. We're talking 25 to 100 after the bulb is broken and you have done a consumer EPA-approved cleanup.
Right, which most people probably wouldn't do. They just have their vacuum cleaner there for a minute and get the pieces of glass, and that's about it.
Which is the number one thing you should not do. When you have a mercury spill, you never vacuum it.
Well, because it throws it out the exhaust end of the vacuum cleaner, right? It
dispels it. If this happens to you, you need to call a remediation company that knows what they're doing, and you need to leave them.
And you're talking about the little curling light bulbs, right? But what about the regular fluorescent, 2 and 4 foot long fluorescent bulbs?
Same thing. Yeah. Fluorescent bulbs. We actually did a test years ago. I made a video. If people want to go to our orbisvitae.com website, we have a video right there at the top of the forum section that actually shows a little study we did. It's not a scientific study, but we actually rented a $15,000 mercury vapor meter, and we broke different types of bulbs and measured the mercury that was emitted after the breakage. And after an incandescent bulb, there was 0. Of course, that would be expected.
Yeah.
We broke a regular fluorescent tube like the one you're talking about, and there was a tremendous amount of mercury. I can't remember the amounts, but I think it was in 50 or something. It was very, very high. In the immediate vicinity, I think it actually went above 100. And then we tested the fluorescent tubes with the green caps on the end, which are the low mercury fluorescents.
Those are supposed to be the approved ones, right?
Those are better for the environment. They have low mercury. Well, guess what? Our readings were actually a little bit higher on those. And again, it's not scientific.
Mistake on there.
Right, but we used the same method. We broke this in a plastic bag, took air readings in the bag, and the green-capped ones actually had slightly higher readings. I've got this all on videotape.
Wow.
So why was the government pressured into CFL bulbs? Well, people break a light bulb in their house once every 5 to 10 years. So what's going to happen to the mercury exposure levels in the houses across the world? Because you're not going to, if you break a bulb in your house, you're not going to register it. The next owner's not going to know.
Yeah.
And then you start coming down with illnesses. I actually know a couple from online that actually broke one in their bedroom. Mm. And within a few days, they both started having strange symptoms, became very ill, had one symptom after another, and they finally tied it back to the bulb breakage.
Wow.
Yeah. So once again, mercury.
And just in case you don't use light bulbs, that you can have it in your teeth too, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the idea of installing mercury into your body is not science. There is no... Now, this statement, I love to say this statement because it is absolutely true. There is no uncompromised scientist that would actively promote the use of mercury in your body, whether it be by vaccines, whether it be by amalgam fillings, dental fillings. There is no uncompromised scientist that would do such a thing. It's not science. It's Machiavellianism.
Or the other way to look at it is that it is absolutely science, and it is the science of changing a population to be controllable and not be able to think.
Exactly.
Which happens to be what happened. I mean, look around, right?
They have been very successful, and if I might quote something from the Bible that I think is one of my favorite evidences of what's happening, that talks about this very, very thing, Revelation 18:23. Okay, there's a lot of examples of this kind of stuff in Scripture, and this is one of my favorites because it's happening right now. You can see it, you can measure it, it's scientifically being shown. It says, "And the great merchants of the earth deceive the people by their sorcery." It says the merchants were the great men of the earth, and they deceived they deceived the people by their sorcery. Merchants, who are the merchants? Let's break this down. And this is actually a prophecy that is given shortly before the return of Christ, the second return of Christ. This is part of how the world will fall into a great deception, a global deception. There'll only be a small part of the people that will see through the deception. That's the context here. So what does this actually say? So the great merchants of the great merchants, the merchants were the great men of the earth, for by their sorcery they deceived the nations. So the merchants, what does that word actually mean? It means wholesalers, manufacturers, traders. It's those who are in merchandising. They sell and they make things. They were the great men of the earth. The word great doesn't mean good. It actually means powerful. Right. So these merchandisers became the powerful men of the earth, for by your sorcery they deceived the nations. The word sorcery is a Greek word pharmakia, which means to drug or poison. There it is, chemtrails.
That's what sorcery means? I didn't know that. Wow.
So the merchants of the earth drugged and poisoned, both, two different things, drug and poison, the population in order to facilitate the large-scale global deception before the return of Christ.
And you know, what's weird about that, too, and it sounds completely accurate to me, is that those merchants, the people deceiving and poisoning everybody, they're being deceived more than anybody, because they're being subject to the same thing that they're doing to the world. They're not escaping it.
Exactly. And you know what's really amazing is that mercury, and this ties right into what you're saying, mercury is used by certain couple religions, Vodun and Santeria, to actually induce spiritism. And what they do is they actually will wear mercury pendants around their neck. They'll sprinkle it around their doorways or in their homes.
That doesn't sound like a very desirable state to me. I mean, induce
pretty bad idea.
Yeah.
Right. If you go on YouTube, if you go on YouTube and you actually watch videos of people practicing these religions who are exposed to mercury, what they do is they do it to facilitate possession by a spirit. They want to induce spiritual possession. And that's because they believe that's a good thing.
Well, so that would probably work pretty well, because any kind of drug use takes down your resistance to things like that, which, by the way, is real. But, I mean, using mercury, there's so many other toxic drugs that aren't as bad. It seems like not a very wise choice.
Yeah, absolutely. But and it does, because it removes your will. It breaks down your will. It breaks down your intellect. It facilitates fear. It breaks down the mechanism, the chemical and hormonal mechanisms in your body that are neuroregulators that keep you calm and focused and intellectual. And it turns you into someone emotional, fearful. And if you've ever seen the videos of these people who are doing this to themselves, they look like people. If you were to compare them to people who are depicted as possessed in Hollywood movies, they look very similar to what you're seeing in these depictions.
Yeah, I think that's going on, and there are stories about that going on before long past cataclysmic events and things like that. I think it's true. And
in fact, I wonder, one of the things that binds to mercury most strongly is gold. And you're right. It's found together a lot. Yeah, in fact, in the mercury vapor meter we use, that's how they actually measure the mercuries. What they do is they pass the air over gold foil, and then they measure the changes in resistance to the gold foil, and then they use that resistance change to measure the amount of mercury. Wow, and that's how they get their measurements. While there's been some possibilities, there have been some people who have talked about the value of gold is just not its monetary value, but some people take it for detoxing.
Yeah, I know. They call it monatomic gold is what they're talking about.
Right, and this practice of using gold for, and even silver, silver's also can chelate that way, goes back to ancient times, where those people in power at those times had this knowledge about mercury.
They were the ones that took the gold. That's right.
They were the ones who took the gold not only for the value, but also because it was a protection.
I mean, they swallowed the gold in a white powder form primarily.
They ingested it, right. And I think that this is an allusion to the fact that this religion that the globalists are part of, which people like William Cooper talk about, and other people who have done a lot of research. They talk about that even these leaders in ancient civilizations had this knowledge about mercury and gold, and they've used mercury as an agent to control populations for even centuries.
Yeah.
This is something that's gone on for a long time. And even today, I will tell you, I've said earlier that I actually watch TV differently than other people. I remember I lived in Jamestown, New York, and 3 popular channels, Discovery Channel, History Channel, some other channel, I can't remember, all started shows about tattoos at the same time. They all started shows glorifying the use of tattoos. Now, because I watch television differently, I was like, okay, well, there must be something potentially bad about tattoos. I'm not saying all tattoos are bad, but I'm just saying there could be something potentially bad. I don't know why. Years later, I found out, did some research and started finding out about the inks that they use containing, some of them contain mercury. The red ones is the red orb cinnabar. I'm not saying all of them in modern day do. They've tried to switch to more safer substances. So if you're going to get a tattoo, you need to make sure
check the ingredients,
out the inks and make sure they're synced. But red tattoos were classically cinnabar, which is the red orb mercury. Other tattoos like cobalt was blue. Oxides of copper were green, and so on and so forth. And some of these things were used as the coloring. And so by watching TV differently, I drew a conclusion. There must be something wrong with this, because the globalists who run these
why would they promote it unless it's really bad for you, right, in some way?
Exactly. And that's what I hope for most people, is I really hope that people will begin to watch television in their heads, and when they see someone mention, fringe nationalists like they did on The Rookie, or they see Criminal Minds is one loaded with, there's a real anti-Christian agenda going on, because the powers that be do hate Christians, and I believe there's several reasons for that. They have a popularized reason, which I think is not really accurate, but save that for another time. But nevertheless, Criminal Minds, if you watch, I've watched a number of these episodes, and whenever the perpetrator, usually it's involved with sex crimes, they almost always, the perpetrator, there'll be a cross, they'll be wearing a cross, there'll be scriptures in the background. It's absolutely amazing how they set up these visual associations, even if they don't say it.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say, is even without explaining, just show you the symbols.
Right, because your mind works by association. Many of the conclusions and the feelings that you get when you're thinking about things are based on the associations that have been made in your mind. And when you're watching these images, they will actually say words at certain times. And so at the same time, they're showing these images. And it's when you watch, you start seeing, if you watch 1 or 2 episodes, you don't catch it. But when you start watching a whole series, you start seeing what we call patterns of behavior. They're always set up in the same way. And they really love to demonize Christianity, which is very interesting.
I've noticed that too.
Well, and also the Pope. The Pope is promoting ecumenicalism, bring all the religions of the world together except one. If you're a Bible-believing Christian, you're not invited to the table. Now, if you're a Methodist, it's okay. Or if you're one of these other large organized groups, they're all welcome. But an independent Bible-believing Christian churches are not welcome at the
really interesting. The only danger, I would say, in watching TV with that kind of analytical approach is, you're going to discover a lot of that stuff, but you're also going to absorb a huge amount of unknown subliminal programming that is put into there all the time, and you're not going to be able to analyze that. And you have to be pretty careful that you don't absorb it without being aware of it.
Absolutely. In fact, that's why I try to bring it to people's attention for 2 reasons. First of all, if you're aware of it, then you're not subject to it. You'll be subject to things you're not aware of, but if you see that
I'm saying stuff that you can't see. Right. That flashes on for milliseconds and stuff like that.
Sure, exactly. But the other reason I say it to people, too, is because if you don't understand or believe that there's a global conspiracy, like is prophesied in the Bible, like many other people have talked about, like hundreds of whistleblowers had talked about over the years and explained over the years, if you don't believe it, then when you're watching television, you're watching your TV shows, start looking for all of these takeaway stories, all of these little pieces of propaganda or these visual artifacts that leave you with a takeaway conclusion that lends itself to globalism, whether it's pro-vaccine, whether it's anti-natural herbs, whether it's natural medicine and natural methods of healing.
Yeah, those are really under attack everywhere.
Right. These things are all over mainstream media, and so if you don't believe in globalism, just look at how all of the movie houses and virtually all the television, not all of them, but virtually all, I'd say, at least in my experience, 90% of the shows I've seen for many, many years, 90% have intentional takeaway propaganda embedded in them that you can see if you know what to look for.
Yeah, you're right. And once you realize that, you probably want to do something to change the number of hours you're sitting in front of a TV, and especially with children who are not screening anything. And it brings up, the ubiquitous nature of screen time now for kids and also adults. They've succeeded in getting everybody to spend most of their time sitting in front of a screen that's getting all these unknown updates. And we actually have, most of us, I think, there may be exceptions, have no idea what we're actually absorbing staring at the screen all day.
Exactly. And if I say if you have to go and expose yourself to a little of that to see the stuff that you can see and finally realize how important it is to get away from that, then fine. If that's going to help you realize that this stuff is real, then at least something good has come from it, and then you can get yourself away from
the real world out in nature and with other human beings and things hasn't successfully been eliminated yet. They're trying to get everybody to live their whole life in virtual reality, but we're not quite there yet. There's still an option to spend some time away from the screens.
And what did Orwell say in 1984 about they will not look up from their screens, right?
Yeah, it's almost there.
So now we're not having conversations with each other. That's part of the problem with society.
No, people sit around a table and text each other. I didn't believe that until I saw it happen.
And that's divide and conquer, because one of the most dangerous things to globalism is your human relationships with the people around you.
Yeah, exactly. So even though we haven't really done a lot with solutions in this conversation, real life interaction with other human beings and with nature might be a place to start.
Absolutely. In fact, that's one thing when I was having political meetings years ago, when people came together, great things began to happen. It was really amazing to see when you'd have a group of like-minded people come together and they started, helping each other. They started, going, having a meal with each other. They started talking about their beliefs. They started teaching and sharing ideas. They started business deals and, improving their business and their quality of life.
And that's the old 2 or more people thing. And not only is it mentioned there, but I think in the original founding documents of America and any other country that wants to go along with it, the right to assemble is considered really fundamental, and that's people coming together with each other physically.
Right, and so now in order to assemble, you need a permit, which is permission. You need a permit. You need permission from the state. One of the most intelligent people I've ever known, who was involved with a political party years ago I was involved in, he actually made a statement once. I'm trying to recall how he actually said it. It'll come to me. But it's about human relationships. It's about when you break that down. Essentially, they're dividing and conquering.
Yeah.
And that's in part where our power lies, is having relationships with each other.
It's being broken down in education too, not just with little kids that have to sit and not say anything, and you get punished for talking to the kid at your desk next to you. But this continues all the way in a different form up through graduate school, and at PhD level, people are being taught in classes that a real discussion, which means, of course, scientific, is not saying anything you feel or think. And I'm totally in favor of emotions that come from a good place. I think cutting those off is a mistake. That's not what we were against before with the crazy aspect of emotional stuff. But in scientific approved conversations, people who are really educated are supposed to cite things they read in journals, and that's their opinion. And then the other person says, oh, really? Well, Dr. Y says this. And the other person says, well, yeah, even though Dr. X says this in this particular journal, I guess Dr. Y is right. So thanks for the good conversation. And that's how they're actually teaching you to communicate in graduate school now.
Yeah, and talking about emotionalism, the place where we're coming from is that when you let those good things flow from your heart, right? When you are going with them, those are discerned. What I mean when I say emotionalism is unabated emotionalism, undiscerned. You're just going with your emotion without thinking about it.
Like the programmed emotionalism, right?
Well, right. Because from your emotions will come both good and bad things. You'll have compassion, you'll have love for other people, but you'll also have disdain and hatred. The idea is that your mind is first saying, what emotions am I going to act upon and what emotions am I going to deny?
Right,
and if your brain and if your mind is not working properly, then, which is what Mercury does to you, then you don't have that level of discernment, and you become a completely emotionally responsive person, which is what I call emotionalism.
Yeah.
Which then emotionalistic people are the ones who are very controllable.
Yeah, exactly. And these things are tricky to put into words because they're really subtle. And I think there's another sense that people can develop that supersedes even areas that intellect can't grasp. And it's when you're asked to do something immoral, you don't have to compare it against a list of moral and immoral acts in a book somewhere. You can say, no, I won't do that because it's hurting this other person, or creating unnecessary pain and suffering or things like that. You don't have to intellectually be able to justify it. If you're healthy and wide awake, you can feel immediately that it's not a good thing to do.
Yeah, morality is written in us in a sense, I think, where most people know right and wrong. I'm not saying everybody, maybe there are outlying exceptions, but
where they did this experiment, they took people off the street and see if they would give electric shocks to somebody that would potentially kill them, but it was all for the sake of an experiment, and almost all of them did it.
Exactly, and that's why I always say use your head first. If you have bad emotions, they need to be controlled. Your head needs to be the gateway,
Yeah. If you're a brainwashed person, which everybody is at this point to some degree, you have to have a way to catch it and recover, hopefully.
And that's the beauty of logic and reason, is that you can see, if you can think reasonably, if you can use reason and logic, then you can look at a situation like gun control or any of these other ridiculous things that are being pushed, and say, what is going to be the result of this? What do we know historically? What is the data we have? Not how do I feel about this extreme situation. It's not about how you feel about it. It's about what is going to be the result of this particular proposal.
Yeah.
And I can imagine.
And then you'll find out that it is totally logical. It's just not for the aim that they say.
Right. It's for their own.
This is how you disarm the population so that only the people committing crimes and the government forces have weapons. And that leads to a total tyranny situation.
Well, and we have historic examples of that. How many times have countries disarmed their people, and then within the next 5 years, they had massacres?
Yeah, not just Germany. Cambodia and all, communist China, all kinds of places. Soviet Russia.
Exactly. And I remember what my friend said, who ran the party. He said something kind of shocking that was hard to believe until I explained it to you. He said, "Do you know it's illegal to work It's illegal to work except for two conditions in America. It's illegal to work. It's illegal to work unless you have permission from the government, or you work for someone who has permission from the government. You have to either, when you go into business, you need to have.
Oh, you mean by work? You mean get a job, right?
Yes.
Because you can build some little thing in your house and you don't need permission for that. But if you're working,
if you sell it, you do though. If you are a business,
that's a good point. If you sell it,
you need a license.
Yeah.
Yeah, that comes down to licensing, which people lost their lives over early in this country, that they were absolutely opposed to licensing.
Licensing is amazing. People have been conditioned to think that licenses give you privileges, but they don't. Licensing makes you controllable.
That's the whole point of licensing and regulation, which is globalism. Globalism is being introduced to the public by creating problems like pollution, right? They're spraying all this stuff all over the world with jets. Just one example of their own pollution that they're releasing.
Yeah.
Then they say, oh, this is a global issue. All the nations must come together to regulate emissions. So this regulation through licensing is the way they're bringing in, one of the ways they're bringing in globalism. And this is what we talked about earlier, Werner von Braun talked about, is that they will use these problems, asteroids, those were one of them in the alien attack, and all of these threats will be used to legitimize in the public mind global regulation. And what is regulation? It is government.
Yeah.
At least in that scenario. So that is what global government is. We're going to have a United Nations in order to protect you from the dangers that they created.
Exactly, and guarantee world peace so that everything will be good from then on.
That was one of the itemized threats, was war. It wasn't only asteroids.
Yeah, it would end war.
And pollution. It was war, that the nations would come together. Right.
And I think the updated Agenda 21 intents enumerated in Agenda 2030 that they met in New York City recently about was going to end hunger and stress and especially inequality. It's going to end inequality because everybody knows that's evil.
Mm-hmm. And so ultimately, what are the solutions, you think?
The solutions according to that, or the solutions to that?
The solutions to globalism.
Well, I mean, certainly one of them is to heal yourself from your own brainwashing and heal your body so that your body and your brain work again. I think without those things, it's kind of unrealistic to think that the real solutions can be enacted when your brain's still compromised. So certainly, getting yourself healthy on all levels would be one of the prerequisites.
Think clearly, right?
Yeah, because otherwise, like everything you've been saying about logic is irrelevant, because if your brain no longer works, logic is really difficult. Exactly.
And relationships
with actual humans that aren't in a screen.
One of the things we have on our website is we try to help people learn how to talk to other people. How can you approach other people, and how can you help them open their eyes? Because your typical emotionally based human being does not want to think about globalism. They don't want to think about chemtrails. They don't want to think about pollution or about threats that are coming or about conspiracies, because it's not pleasant. So people edit themselves. So we talk about, well, how do you approach people? And I think a couple of the most powerful things you can do is, first of all, you have to be their friend. You have to gain their trust by truly being a good person towards them. You have to become a servant to them in a way. If they need some bread, if you can help them, be a friend to them.
Right.
And then your friends will begin to listen to you. And that's part of the process of establishing these relationships. And then people will start listening to you about these things. If you go shouting from the, just shouting and being emotionalistic about these things in people's faces who don't know you, they're just going to be they're going to very easily discard you and not listen to you. So those relationships are critical.
Well, I think it's good you brought that up, because we got a couple minutes left here, and it would be good to mention to people who are listening to this call, is that on a website, or how are you reaching people now, and what are your projects, and how can people get in touch with those?
Absolutely. Got a few websites out there, globalskywatch.com. There's a ton of information there. I get emails from people all the time who appreciate the information, and since they benefit from it, I'm sure whoever listens to this conversation will as well. Also, Orbis Vitae, it's Latin for Circle of Life, Orbis, ORBISVITAE.com. Okay. We have a lot of information there as well. Just if you want to contact us, our contact information or my contact information is on those websites, and I try to respond to emails. I'm not always able anymore because I get too many, but I do the best I can.
Okay.
And let's all have relationships again and reconnect and start to trust one another instead of being artificially induced to be afraid of each other.
Yeah, it's a great place to start, and fix your health, learn about natural ways to do that too. I think it all ties together, your brain and the rest of your body and your emotional state, your ability to interact with other people. It's all really parts of one issue. So
which is why you do your radio show, right? This is why I used to do a radio show and why I put the websites out there. Not because we mean any harm whatsoever, none whatsoever. This is to help people realize what's going on so we can fix problems that hurt people, so people can live better quality lives, live longer, and be happier when they're living their life. That's what my life is about, and I know your life is about that as well.
Yeah, well, you're reminding people they're not helpless. We're being trained to think that we're dependent on teams of experts to run our lives and make every decision for us and keep us safe and tell us what to eat and drink and all that stuff, and you're not really that helpless. Everybody listening to this is an amazing, limitless, incredible being that is not the little dependent creature that government wants you to think. And get back in touch with yourself as step one. Because if
people aren't helpless?
Yeah, it's real. I know it's a conspiracy theory, but I found it to be true. And whatever, you think you're going to go out and serve everybody and love everybody, and you have all these unresolved conflicts with yourself. That's the limit to which you can take your relationships with other people. So you need to see where you need to reintegrate yourself, and it's really part of getting your health back. And then your relationships all reflect that, and they can get some depth to them, and it gets better. So
and right along the lines of you telling people about their power, why do you think they're making chemtrails invisible now? Why did they make them short, fly at high altitudes, and now there's no visible trail at all, yet they're still emitting things onto the public? They're doing that, obviously, because they want to keep it secret. But why? Because what you said is true, because the people have the power.
Right.
If you're willing to work together and be actively involved, you have the power to change it. That's why they keep this stuff secret.
Yeah.
Because if you knew what was being done and you knew the kind of life and the kind of world that you could have without all of this stuff being done to you and injected in you and sprayed on you and otherwise exposing you to it, then you would be actively involved. You would.
So in other words, if normal came back, so if you recover from all the terrible junk that you've been trained to eat and drink and smoke and breathe and everything, and you recover from your education and you recover from fake science and all this stuff, and you find out what normal is again, it's something really good, and you're going to like it. So, be encouraged. Start like now, whenever you want to, and get the life quality back, because it comes from inside yourself.
And be empowered by knowing that globalists keep secrets, because you have the power to stop them.
Right, it's an affirmation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. Sounds exciting. Well, I hope everybody goes to globalskywatch.com on the other sites, and hope you'll officially come on our show, not just in a recorded phone call in the near future.
Anytime I would love to. Sorry for all my time constraints, but
no, that's okay.
I do work more than full-time, 12 or more hours a day, so just trying to keep up.
I know. Okay, well, thanks for giving us the time, and hope the rest of your day goes great, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, both of you.
Okay, Russ. Talk to you later. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Okay, you guys, that was Russ Tanner from globalskywatch.com and his other site that he mentioned during the talk, Orbis Vitae. Globalskywatch.com is a really good site. I've used it a lot because it has like a listing of clubs exposing geoengineering all over the world in a lot of different countries, some of whom I've communicated with, and they're really good. So you might want to look at that site. It's got a lot of basic information on, like geoengineeringwatch.org does, and they're just good resources for you guys to know about. And sorry that I was explaining to Doug the reason I kept crossing my arms during the show is not because I was trying to look stern or anything. It's because it's getting cold and I'm not used to it. It was in the low 40s this morning, and it's been in the high 80s recently. So just adapting to the sudden change in season. I guess it must be climate change, right? It's because the weather changed. In any case, Russ remains a good friend of ours, and I'm really grateful to have had the experience with him as a fellow co-host on Geoengineering Watch Radio, which you can still hear archives from that somewhere, I think. And let's see, anything else we want to say? It was a long call. I didn't expect it to go that long, but I'm glad I included everybody in it who wants to listen to a couple of crazy conspiracy theorists talking about a wide range of different subjects. We also have the Saturday show, if you don't know about that, 4:30 Pacific and 7:30 p.m. Eastern on Saturday afternoons, where that's called Lost Arts Radio Live. You're invited to that. Anybody that wants to go deeper into the solution part that we didn't really talk about that much in this phone call, it was mostly about the issues that are happening right now. The solution part we get into more on levels that I really can't talk about without getting banned on the public channels, and you can access that through planetaryhealingclub.com, planetaryhealingclub.com. There are small dues to be in that, but they help us keep the work going because we're not really pushing any products or anything, as you know. And ultimately, if we find enough funds, we'll build a school and make a physical demonstration of what the alternatives to these things are and what normal really could look like, which is exciting. Hopefully that'll happen. So if you're a friendly billionaire who wants to support something good, get in touch with us. Or if you're just a regular non-billionaire who has input and wants to make suggestions or comments or questions or anything, you can still email richard@lostartsradio.com. I read all those, and so far been able to answer everybody as well. What else? We've got a new page on subscribestar.com/lostartsradio if you want to help support us and keep us going at a small or large level. You can do that. There's different levels enumerated there. Subscribestar.com/lostartsradio. And in case we start getting banned everywhere, just in case that happens, and if we ever talk about anything controversial that they don't want to go everywhere, remember to go to our main website, which is lostartsradio.com, and get on the mailing list. We're not really using it much now, but in the future, if we start getting cut off more, we'll use it to get information to you, and that doesn't cost any money. We're also on Brighteon.com, which is a non-censoring site, a really good one that everybody should use, set up by Mike, whose last name I can't mention publicly because he's banned everywhere, but you probably know who I'm talking about. That's Brighteon.com/channel/Lost Arts Radio, and you can stay in touch with us there. may eventually show up on band.video, I hope, if there's a way to get on there. That's a new, exciting, growing site that you might want to take a look at. Band, BANNED.video. I was on it yesterday. It's a really good site. And we'll update you more as things develop. But a lot of interesting conversations that I want to let you in on, and great guests that are coming up. One of the major guests that's been on Alex's show a lot is going to be on Lost Arts Radio shortly. I'm going to not mention his name in particular yet, but that's in the next couple of weeks, I think. So stay in touch, and thanks for spending the time with us and eavesdropping in on our conversation with Russ. Thanks to Doug for putting it all together as always, and hope you have a great week, and we'll see you here next time.
Introducing Lost Arts Radio on Subscribestar.com. Just go to Subscribestar.com/LostArtsRadio to find our rewards program, offering 10 different giving levels starting at just $5 a month. We offer incredible value for any rewards level, from extra monthly interview videos not available publicly to subscription-based Planetary Healing Club videos once, twice, or 3 times a month, to private counseling sessions with Lost Arts Radio host Richard Sachs, to tech help with me, Doug Diamond. We even have one option where you can be the star on Lost Arts Radio as our guest on a specially produced show just for you. We conduct an interview with you and broadcast it to our growing network and listenership. Our Subscribestar levels are one of a kind and offer great rewards for any budget. Please help support Lost Arts Radio. We can't do it without you. With increasing censorship on many of our channels, we really need your support today to keep doing what we're doing. As Richard says, we're not even at survival level yet. Lost Arts Radio has 3 weekly shows. Lost Arts Radio Live each Saturday night at 7:30 Eastern, 4:30 Pacific, which is a live stream currently on multiple platforms in case we get banned from some of the larger ones. Right now, we're on 2 YouTube channels, Facebook Live, Periscope, which is Twitter, Twitch, and DLive. You can access these broadcasts by going to www.lostartsradio.com/live for all the links to those channels. The Planetary Healing Club meets right after Lost Arts Radio Live at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific on Saturday nights. And our Sunday show with guests airs at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific on Sunday nights on our Blog Talk Radio channel, our YouTube channels, Facebook pages, and on Brighteon. Be sure to sign up for our free email list just in case we do get banned on big tech's platforms. It's just a matter of time, really. They don't like the stuff we talk about, and they do not want the truth out there. In fact, they have already attacked us numerous times. Join our free email list so we can let you know where we are and how to access our shows. The sign-up button is right on the top right on most pages of our website. The best starting point for all things Lost Arts Radio is our main site, lostartsradio.com, where you can find the hottest news selection videos that we curate just for you. Those are on the homepage and added to daily, as well as articles and breaking news about information you really need to know. Our show archives, the 10 most recent shows, are right on our homepage, as well as our Blog Talk Radio page at blogtalkradio.com/lostartsradio, or just click the All Things Radio Show tab right on our website. We're in the podcast directory on iTunes, and all of our shows except the banned ones are on our YouTube channels at Lost Arts Radio and at Diamond Disc. Our Brighteon page is really taking off, and we often have editors' picks videos right on their homepage. Visit brighteon.com/channel/LostArtsRadio. On our site, you can also access our free listener forum as well as sign up for the Planetary Healing Club, which is just $25 a month, where you get private access to a one-on-one interaction with host Richard Sachs and myself and the other club members who participate live. More info can be found at planetaryhealingclub.com. We're providing solutions in there to make the world a better place. Come join us. Stay tuned because up next, you'll get to hear a really great song by an independent artist that we're doing our best to support. Go to lostartsradio.com/music for the full list of all the great songs and bands that we spin on our audio-only podcast shows. If you're in a band and want to submit a song for consideration for airplay on Lost Arts Radio, visit my website at diamonddiscaudio.com for more information about the music placement, mastering, and mixing work that I do. Thanks again for listening to and supporting Lost Arts Radio. We love having you as part of our family to learn, experience, and grow with.
I will save the world, then someday get the girl. All the power that I possess